Inspired once again by Nina. I'm a child sexual abuse survivor. My name's Angie. I've got two YouTube channels, Angie Paradisney and Angela Paradisney. I have a DVD on Vimeo, Chasing Rainbows, which I must transfer. I have a website, which I don't maintain very well, angie.gowebs.co.uk, and my most active forum is Facebook, with 3 or 4 groups. I want to address the issue of mothers, enablers, passive-aggressive, codependent partners of abusers. We spend a lot of time focusing on abusers and maybe don't address enough energy towards maybe don't address enough energy towards the women, mostly women, around them. So, yeah, my mother somehow manages to cause more pain than actually my father and grandfather, and godmother's husband, Herbert Faber, and French abuser Marcel Viro, and multiple abusers in my life, many of whom at the moment are just images because of drugs being used as well, and early childhood abuse. But I want to stay focused, and I said I'd make a video every day, just for a season. I don't know why, but it seems important. And I want to focus on, the enablers. So the thing that incited absolute rage and devastation in me just recently is my mother changed the locks on her 2-bedroom council house, which I secured for her to escape my dangerous and abusive father after 59 years, can't be, after 59 years marriage. So she had all her professional support, saying, she went to the guards in Oldcastle and reported that she wanted my dad's shotgun license revoked. He was threatening her daily that he would kill her. He had empty drums in the garage ready to fill with petrol and set the house alight. Every time they got in the car, he would say, "I'm going to drive in the back of a lorry or the back of a brick wall and kill us both," and so on. Every night she went to sleep whilst cohabiting, where my sister recently died, living with him as his carer. Every night she said she never knew if she'd wake up the next morning. She would wake up in the middle of the night with him staring down at her, checking her, breathing over her, sinister. She said she prayed and just literally did not know from day to day if she would survive. But I want to record some of the cruelty and why it's so powerful. Like, why should an enabling, neglecting mother hurt more than an overtly abused grandfather, father, all the males that perpetuate it? And it's something to do with the psychological trauma, because if that same person, like my mother breastfed me till I was 9 months old, my mother is dissociated, and she can have parts of her that are loving and nurturing even to this day, that still suck me back in, and I still think, oh, mummy loves me, mummy's going to help me, mummy and I understand each other, mummy's there for me. And there's something about that sucks me back in and then devastates me every time. So since my sister died whilst caring for my dad, because mum had left and I'd been fired and Sharon had been fired, Amory gets rid of everybody that threatens the ever-expanding portfolio of 65-acre of a farm and 2 houses on it. Since my sister died, and my son, who was the only person that was doing anything for her and was the last person to see her alive, since he testified honestly about the torment that my father was putting Fiona through. The family, as warned to my niece Louise, instead of saying, yep, we've got to do something about Dad, we should have done so 50 years ago, no, they're trying to project onto my 21-year-old son Josh and make him the bad guy. Mum changed the locks on him. She'd returned all his post, marked, gone away, despite him coming every weekend saying, Granny, I'm waiting on important post, I've got my tax rebate to come, and I got stopped with no NCT, Mum, I might have a fine in the post, it's really important. She never said a word, and I only found out that she had sent them back, gone away, because the copper that stopped Josh came to the door from Cavan and said, you know, if your boy doesn't pay this fine, he's going to end up in court. The letter's come back, gone away. And Josh took a year off university to look after me because I was sick, and is on the dole, he's on job seekers allowance, and he got a phone call from the job seekers department saying, you're being taken off the register as homeless because your post has come back marked, gone away. So that's what she's currently up to, and she's hiding. I don't know where she is, I don't know where she is. She could be in hospital in St James's in Dublin, she could be at my sister Sharon's in England, she could be, I don't know where she is. I know in the last few weeks she went into hospital in Cavan, supposedly because they couldn't stabilise her bloods. She's got leukemia. She was diagnosed nearly 12 years ago. She was put in a clinical trial onto Gleevec, and the last update I had as her carer was it's negligible. The leukemia is hardly there. It's totally manageable. Her biggest problem is her mobility, which could be sorted, but she's been trying to die tragically for 12 years and is disgusted that the leukemia doesn't seem to be doing that. So now it's like, oh well, I can't walk, and I'm 82 and so on. And I think when she started to do the nefarious things to my son as a means of hurting me and my son, and like anything but tell the truth about Dad, she's been ducking and diving. So I think she spent a week in Cavan trying to stabilise her blood, which might be because she won't eat healthily and won't exercise or drink enough water, and then spent some time in the Sheelan nursing home, because it's easy to solicit sympathy at 82 when you tell them, oh, I've got leukemia. Don't tell them it's negligible, it's been dealt with by a clinical trial of a revolutionary drug. So I think she's just hiding because she may have got wind of the fact that when I reported, finally, after 50-something years, my father for historical abuse and others, since as far back as I can remember, in recounting my first disclosure to the Metropolitan Police, when I described my mother holding me down, no, Dad held me down, while Mum forced crushed drugs into my mouth to knock me out because I was hysterical after another brutal beating that left me unable to talk or walk for a week. And straight away the copper was like, and what's her name, and where does she live, and so on, because it, and I don't know why it was such a surprise to me to see it, that she wasn't just guilty of, turning the other way. That was aiding and abetting. For Dad to hold me down and tell Mum to force drugs down my mouth, which she told me was Valium or something, but she had no right to drug me, to shut me up after a brutal beating, and then to collude the next day in removing me once again to a Jesuit institution courtesy of Auntie Mary, the nun, and bring me with them to Ireland because I was mute and battered and immobile from the latest beating, and had screamed hysterically and reached a point where I said, I don't care if you kill me, I'm not shutting up anymore. and then dumped me in a bed and breakfast in Tipperary, because Auntie Mary said I can't take her again. I just can't. I used to get sent to Mary regularly, you know, because they wouldn't go to a doctor and say she's mute from trauma, from beating, and from abuse and neglect. So I'd get taken to the nuns, and Auntie Mary would just put me somewhere within her network as a mother provincial in a Jesuit religious order in Ireland and internationally. So this last dumping on Auntie Mary was in Tipperary, and she said, oh, I can't take her this time. I'm in charge of a home for retired monks and priests. You know, we can't put a 15-year-old anywhere. So undeterred, they put me up the road in a bed and breakfast with a woman who delighted in telling me daily all the scandals about the priests and how many had children, and the bishops, and, you know, all the dirt on the Catholic Church, and just basically left me. No visits from anybody. I think Auntie Mary said I could come to Mass. Yeah, told me the Mass times. The rest of the time I got fed by the bed and breakfast lady. I think I had dinner with the monks where Auntie Mary was working. Whilst my mother and father took a holiday round Ireland, because they planned it. You know, why should a battered, beaten, traumatised, mute child stop them having their holiday? The other thing, I'm just going to make a video every day, but the other thing that horrifies me, my mother says she had 8 pregnancies in 9 years since, you know, when she married my father. She converted to Catholicism to marry him, and of course part of that was no contraception. So she got pregnant every year for 8 years, and lost 3 of the babies. But what she leaves out is that she both told me, and I overheard, that she tried to self-abort repeatedly. And this seemed to have been something that was very common in the Air Force, and particularly around R.A.F.Wegberg in Germany, on a military camp where myself and my dead sister were born. So one theory Mum put forward was the 3 miscarriages she had was because she couldn't carry boys. Another time I heard her telling Auntie Phil Ray, who's dead, and so are 4 of her 5 children from all unrelated cancers, which was also, I believe, medical experiments. I heard her telling Auntie Phil that all the military wives used to take tablets from anafi and gin and hot baths and try and use coat hangers and things to self-abort. She denies that. She told me another time that the reason she favours my sister Sharon, who's the 4th of 5 girls, well, the 4th of 5 girls except Fiona's gone now, but Sharon was the 4th child, and Mum you know, periodically favours her financially and otherwise. And she says, oh, that's because I felt so guilty because I tried to get rid of her all through the pregnancy, and then they told me around 8 months that she probably had spina bifida, and then I felt so guilty, I thought it was my fault for the gin and hot baths and the tablets from the nappy and so on. And so when she was born healthy, I couldn't believe it, and I thought, like, you know, I'd been let off. She denies saying that as well. So she denies the conversations I heard in shock, like a frozen memory, of her telling Auntie Phil about all the gin and hot baths, coat hangers and tablets from the nappy. She denies saying that you know, she was fully convinced that Sharon's disability prognosis was down to her nefarious carryings on in pregnancy. She denies everything, and that's part of the head wreck. I hold her hugely responsible for Kathy being made a ward of court at age 14 with parental responsibilities severed, and a recommendation of her being placed at a minimum of 50 miles from family and being secreted away from where we lived in Melksham in Wiltshire to Cheltenham in Gloucestershire, and then, you know, put into a program, another research program that the mad scientists were funded for post-World War II. and having memory blocks. Also, clearly criminal. Mum tells perfectly open about how at 8 years old, Kathy did something naughty. Daddy flung her across the sitting room. The aluminium Air Force House window was open inways, and Kathy got a fractured skull at 8. Flung across the room at 8 years of age by my father, fractured skull. Of course she went to casualty. Of course Mummy didn't tell them, oh, my husband did this. No, of course she didn't. The amount of abuse my mother covered up is off the charts, and I didn't even grasp it as criminal until I was making my statement in Brixton to the Metropolitan Police about Dad, and described Dad holding me down while Mum drugged me with crushed tablets to shut me up because I was embarrassing. You know, we had a restaurant in Brevton and we lived above it, and I was screaming like a banshee after a brutal beating. And you know, it took a copper to totally get it. You know, of course the mother was aiding, abetting, colluding, you know, abusing, neglecting, failing to protect. So I think my mother's got wind that the investigation live and opened by Wiltshire Police in cooperation with Bristol and Avon, and referring to the Metropolitan Police, and in cooperation also, or informing Interpol regarding abuse in Germany and France. I think my mother's got wind that it's not just Dad, but she's being investigated too. So she's desperately trying to immobilise me by hurting my son, and also running around hiding. You know, if it's not leukemia, it's, you know, old age, or it's her bloods, or whatever it is, desperately trying to get off the hook, because I've informed them that even though she is age 2 and she has mobility issues, she's got clarity of mind, her mental acuity, nothing wrong with it, and by God, is she worthy of some questioning. So I just want to thank Nina for 2 things I learned from your video today, Nina. One is, if we don't blow the whistle on our mothers, as well as the more overt male figures in our lives, they have a good chance of actually sinking us. They are master manipulators, very strong Jezebel spirit operating, and they have a good chance to think, oh yes, that daughter is, you know, mentally unstable, oh dear God, you know, I don't know how she hasn't been sectioned already, and oh, she's always been a problem to us, you know, just like they got Kathy put away. And you know, just like poor Fiona, the rejection and the cruelty and brutality, not just from my father but from my mother too. More so, I have to say, more so than any cruelty I've suffered from my mother, and you know, Kathy too. But Fiona, it was off the charts, off the charts. How a mother, or maybe with Fiona's case, not even her biological mother, but the levels of cruelty that somebody can inflict on a child that looks to, you know, what God designed to be a nurturer and an encourager. So I'll continue this, but that's my video for today. And you know, just as Nina says, I love my mother, I love my father, and they're poison to be around. And you know, if I keep observing my Christian, you know, childlike loyalty not to blow the whistle on the mothers in these generational abusive families, believe you me, they can be very powerful and very credible, and continue to inflict the devastating cruelty that they inflicted, both by not protecting us, both by not whistleblowing, but also colluded in. And there's more, much more. I'm sure my mother knew that Dad was getting our private education funded, and Mum and Dad were being invited to all sorts of dinner parties and functions with very high level military people, which was not due to was not innate. It was because they had something in common that was very, very dark, but a bit like Mrs. Bucket in that British sitcom. My mother she was ambitious. She was ambitious. We would starve as children, 5 children, an abusive, financially as well as every other way, abusive father, giving Mum pennies to feed us. And even from those pennies, she would cut corners on how much food we got, so that she could do a cordon bleu dinner party on a Saturday night for the, commanding officers and the squadron leaders and all the other military people that were complicit with the paedophile ring that my father had, paedophile ring and medical experiments, illegal clinical trials, psychological experiments that he was paid for to enlist his children in, and Mum. But my point is, she liked the goodies, she liked the kudos, she liked mixing with those officers and commanders and high-level people, and she damn well knew something wasn't right. Even in beatings, when my father would almost froth at the mouth giving beatings, first Kathy, then Fiona, then me. By the time he'd get to me, he was like a lunatic, demented, demonically possessed monster. And I can remember Mum saying, "Oh, that's enough, Nick, now, that's enough now, stop, Nick, that's enough now." But, excuse me, you were like half an hour too late, And the morning after my last beating, which Wiltshire police are looking into, and I told you I'd wet myself with fear and I couldn't get out of bed, and I was just... You said, "Oh, but you were naughty for smoking. Daddy did tell you not to smoke." Does that justify beating a 15-year-old to insanity and to immobility and to total trauma because they were caught smoking cigarettes? Really? Really? To be continued. Dorothy, do pray. You have a lot to answer for. And no amount of cleverness or brutalising my children or eliciting sympathy for being 82 and having almost disappeared leukemia and having some mobility issues, none of that gets you off the hook no more than it gets a 90-year-old Nazi criminal off the hook either, or Lord Janner with Alzheimer's. Daddy's hiding in his dementia and Mummy's desperately running around like a headless chicken, dual purpose, desperately trying to discredit myself and my children, and at the same time running a backup program of I have to be seen as elderly, incapable and maligned. And if all else fails, I'll say it was all Nick's fault and I was a victim too. Well, you weren't just a victim, Mrs. Dorothy Power, ne du pray. You were also a perpetrator, and you still are.